Harlem breathed the way it always did, loud and alive, until the sound cut through it. A sharp slap, casual, practiced, the kind delivered without thinking. A uniformed cop laughed as the elderly woman staggered, her groceries scattering like apologies across the sidewalk. He told her to watch her mouth. He told her to remember her place. People froze. Some looked away. Others stared, knowing better than to speak. This wasn't rage. It was routine. Authority flexed in daylight, confident that shame would land harder than any fist. The cop adjusted his cap, already moving on, already certain the moment would dissolve into nothing. Across the street, silence held. A man stood still, hat low, eyes steady. He didn't rush, he didn't curse. He simply watched, committing every detail to memory, the badge, the grin, the way the crowd swallowed its fear. When the cop turned, the room felt smaller. He never noticed the gaze on his back. But power had just been seen, and it never forgets. Someone important had witnessed everything in silence. Silence arrived so clean it felt unnatural. No shouts, no fists, no scramble of bodies. The street kept breathing, but the moment refused to move. People waited for anger, for noise, for something to break. Nothing did. Across from the fallen groceries, a man remained still, not frozen, deliberate. His hands rested easy, his eyes quiet. He did not comfort the woman, did not chase the cop, did not signal outrage. Restraint filled the space where chaos should have lived. That absence pressed heavier than violence. Experienced men knew the rule. Noise meant impulse. Silence meant inventory. Every witness felt it, the wrongness of calm after insult. Some sensed the weight shift, like a door closing softly. No one understood it yet, but the question lingered. Why wasn't anyone reacting? Because reaction was finished. What came next would take time, and time was his weapon. The street didn't know it yet, but plans were already forming in the quiet, patient, inevitable, like footsteps counted before a fall. No one would forget this pause. Ever again. Harlem had rules long before anyone wrote them down. They weren't polite and they weren't soft, but they worked. Respect kept the streets breathing. It told men where they could stand, how far they could push, and when to back away. Break those rules quietly, and problems stayed small. What happened on that sidewalk wasn't quiet. It wasn't personal either. A uniform humiliating an old woman in public wasn't just cruelty. It was a message. It said authority didn't need permission. It said restraint only applied one way. That was dangerous. Because when disrespect goes unanswered, it spreads. Corners test limits. Crews start watching. Whispers move faster than sirens. Harlem understood this math better than any courtroom ever could. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about balance. Someone had tipped the scale in broad daylight, and the weight didn't land on one man alone. It landed on the block, the neighborhood, the rules themselves. Soon, everyone would feel the shift. Cops, hustlers, politicians, institutions would have to decide who the rules protected. Harlem was listening now, and it was waiting. What followed would not be loud, but it would be final, and no one would pretend surprise afterward in Harlem history. He thought the uniform was armor. In Harlem, men like him walked with a casual cruelty because they believed the city itself stood behind them. Badge first, smile second, consequences never. That was his first mistake, making it public. Private harm could be denied, buried, rewritten into paperwork. But a slap in the open became a witness. It became a story, and Harlem collected stories the way it collected debts. Second mistake, wrong target. An elderly woman wasn't a threat, wasn't even a player. That's what made it worse. Disrespecting someone who couldn't swing back wasn't strength. It was a signal that he'd do it to anyone. That kind of message demands an answer, or it becomes law. Third mistake, wrong neighborhood. Harlem wasn't just streets and storefronts. It was a living network, eyes connected to mouths, connected to men who kept order without uniforms. He didn't see that. He saw a crowd and mistook stillness for surrender. And the timing, he couldn't have picked a worse moment. Because the one man who didn't flinch, the one man who didn't shout, was the one man who remembered. The cop walked away thinking the air had swallowed his insult. But somewhere in that quiet, a decision hardened. This would not be forgiven. It would not be filed. It would not be forgotten. Not by him, ever. Again, he did not feel anger the way other men did. Anger was loud, messy, impatient. He felt alignment. A quiet click when something in the world slipped out of place. Disrespect wasn't an emotion to him, it was a fracture. And fractures spread if you pretend they're harmless. Family mattered. Not because it softened him, but because it sharpened the line. Harm aimed at blood wasn't personal rage, it was proof the balance was broken. He didn't crave spectacle. Chaos drew heat, and heat burned everyone nearby. Order lasted longer. He replayed moments slowly. The badge, the grin, the pause afterward. He measured weight and consequence the way others measured fear. Patience wasn't waiting, it was preparation disguised as stillness. Men who rushed made noise. Noise created options for escape. Silence closed doors. He preferred doors closed. Restoring balance required precision, not fury. The response had to fit the offense, publicly enough to be understood, quietly enough to endure. Too small and disrespect returned. Too loud and the city answered back. So he sat with the decision, letting it settle until it felt inevitable. Not revenge, correction. When action finally came, it would feel less like punishment and more like gravity, unavoidable, impersonal, and perfectly timed. That was how he kept the streets breathing at all times. He didn't reach for a gun because guns ended conversations. He wanted the conversation to keep going. Information came first. Names, schedules, habits, which bars a man drank in, which precinct desk he favored, who covered for him when paperwork went missing. Pressure followed, applied where it felt like coincidence. A bartender stopped serving. A landlord raised questions. A captain asked why complaints kept landing on the same name. No threats, no signatures, just gravity shifting. Each move was small, forgettable, deniable. Outsiders saw nothing. Inside, authority began to hesitate. Doors opened slower. Calls went unanswered. Confidence thinned into caution. This was the trap. Not pain, but uncertainty. When power senses eyes on it, it retreats on its own. He stayed invisible, letting the uniform feel heavier each day. By the time anyone noticed, the decision had already been made. The street was breathing again. No shots, no headlines. Just a lesson delivered so cleanly it looked like order returning naturally without fingerprints or noise at all. Men later would argue about what happened, never agreeing on the moment authority blinked. That confusion was intentional. Fear fades, but doubt lingers. He trusted that. The trigger stayed untouched, yet control changed hands quietly, decisively, forever, leaving no enemy to confront, only a memory reshaped. Day one felt like coincidence. A call not returned, a form misplaced, nothing loud enough to protest. Day two brought delays, quiet ones, the kind that stalled careers without leaving fingerprints. By day three, allies grew busy. Chairs stayed empty. Familiar faces avoided eye contact. No one explained anything. Explanations create trails. Instead, the pressure arrived sideways. Shifts changed, routes reassigned. A name stopped circulating where names usually traveled fast. By day four, confidence thinned. Authority depends on rhythm, and the rhythm was gone. By day five, doors opened slower, then not at all. Even the uniform felt heavier, less certain of itself. The street felt it too, a subtle relief. Conversations loosened. Harlem sensed correction in motion, though no announcement came. Day six carried the weight of inevitability. Waiting became the punishment. Each morning asked the same question without words. How much longer? By the seventh day, everyone understood the rule again. Respect wasn't requested, it was enforced by absence. The countdown ended without ceremony. The lesson settled quietly, exactly where it belonged. No signatures appeared, no apologies offered, yet the balance returned, and the city remembered who decided when pressure stops for everyone involved. It didn't happen officially. No memo circulated, no meeting convened. The institution simply felt the cost and chose silence. Complaints stalled, reports softened. A name stopped moving upward. The cop became something worse than guilty. He became inconvenient. Partners distanced themselves. Supervisors forgot him. Radios went quiet when his voice came through. This was humiliation without spectacle. No cuffs, no courtroom, no shouting crowd. Power didn't fall. It thinned. It evaporated. Authority realized that protecting one man threatened the balance of an entire neighborhood. So the city looked away. And in that turning of the head, the lesson finalized itself. The same streets that once felt careless now felt alert. Windows lingered longer. Conversations paused when footsteps passed. Nothing hostile, just aware. He had walked those blocks believing eyes belonged to him. Now the eyes were everywhere else, watching, measuring, remembering. The uniform was still there. The protection was not. Silence became policy, not announced but enforced. He understood it walking alone, badge intact, authority gone. Every glance carried judgment. Every corner felt exposed. The street had flipped. It wasn't afraid anymore. It was observant, patient, and absolutely uninterested in saving him at all times. Respect restored, without a shot. Fired Harlem didn't need an announcement. It felt the shift the way neighborhoods always do, through rhythm and posture. Conversations straightened, corners relaxed. The insult had been answered without noise, and that mattered. Respect returned not as fear, but as understanding. Authority could walk the streets, but it would walk carefully. The rules hadn't changed, they'd been clarified. Everyone knew where the line lived again. Men talked quietly about it, never naming names. Stories don't survive here unless they carry truth. This one did. It said restraint could be deadlier than rage, that intelligence outlasted muscle. The calm man at the center never claimed credit. He didn't need to. Order was its own signature. Balance didn't require blood, only memory. Harlem breathed easier, not because power disappeared, but because it learned. The streets remembered who restored that lesson and how cleanly it was done. Justice arrived without sirens, without headlines, without a single shot fired. And that was the point. Violence demands attention. Control endures. The city felt safe again, not from force, but from knowing disrespect had limits, and those limits were enforced by minds, not guns. Silence finished the lesson for everyone watching. It was never about the slap. That moment was just the spark that revealed the rule beneath it all. Power could exist in Harlem, but only within limits everyone understood. Cross that line, and the response would arrive without warning or apology. What he left behind wasn't fear. It was clarity. Institutions learned where their reach ended. Men learned that restraint could humiliate louder than fists. Violence, when it came, was optional. Authority, when abused, was negotiable. This lesson didn't fade when the street quieted. It traveled through decades, passed in lowered voices and careful choices. Harlem remembered not the act, but the correction. Dominance didn't require spectacle. It required patience, memory, and the willingness to let others undo themselves. That understanding outlived headlines and arrests. The streets carried that knowledge forward. Respect became preventative, not reactive, and those who enforced it never needed to announce themselves. The warning was simple and permanent. Order would be kept, not loudly, not randomly, but decisively. Harlem remembers who taught it that rule, and more importantly, how. The memory lingers, shaping every encounter, reminding power that silence can still draw bloodless lines forever across Harlem's guarded streets.